Yeah, and good morning, everyone. So, in a few, we'll be starting our webinars, Gender and Development webinar series po. This is our session 2. Ayan, so um, so meron na tayong 36 viewers. So, ayan, good morning, Ma'am Maan from Buson National High School. Ayan, Ma'am Marisol. Ayan, from Ma'am Marisol Canta from Francisco C. Hinayon. Ayan. So, mhm. Shout out muna tayo. We have 36 viewers. Ayan. Good morning, everyone. Ma'am Eva Enriquez Gonzalez. Ma'am Teresita Dampios. Ayan. In a few, we'll be starting na po, So welcome everyone. This is a God webinar series. This is our session 2 entitled Emerging Gender Issues Amidst the COVID-19 Pandemic. Ayan po. Ayan. Hi Ma'am Victoria Elan. Ayan. Ma'am Ann Abayhon Huezan. Ma'am Josephine Yes. Ayan. Ma'am Gladys Lovey Ceroni Pilapil from ay, maraming. Okay. Sige. Yan, so, good morning. Yan, live na po tayo. In a few, we'll be starting our program proper. Okay? Yan, good morning, Ma'am Susan Tan, Ma'am Chu Nation, Ma'am Jocelyn Palmera, Ma'am Nedely Neding. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kate Bigayo, a senior high school nurse of Schools Division of the City of Mati. It is my pleasure to welcome you here this morning. I hope everyone is feeling great. I would like to thank you for joining us today for our Gender and Development webinar series. This is our session 2, Emerging Gender Issues Amidst the COVID-19 Pandemic. Again, this webinar is in partnership of the Department of Education of the Schools Division of the City of Mati and the Davao Oriental State College of Science and Technology Gender and Development Center. To formally begin our webinar, we will start off with our national anthem and to be followed by a prayer.
Sikoy ko kamighimo to langit. Sikoy ko kamighimo to aldaw ay bulan. Ikaw ang nagbuhat sa kabituunan. Ikaw ang nagbuhat sa kalibutan. Manama, mabantog ka. Warag po ko ilingkoy ko. O Diyos, kahibulungan ka. Busa ikaw lang ang simbahon ko.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فقال ربكم ادعوني أستجب لكم آمين يا رب العالمين الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين اللهم اجمع شامل المسلمين والكريستيان والأمم في مدينة دباو وسلم دائما مجتمعنا هذا بالسلم والأمن والتقدم في بلدنا هذا آمين يا رب العالمين ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب ربنا إنك أنت الوهاب ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وصلى الله على خير خلقه سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين آمين يا رب العالمين.
In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Our most gracious Heavenly Father, We come to you today to praise and worship you and give you thanks for all the things you continue to provide for ourselves and our families. Father, we humbly ask for forgiveness for all the times we have offended you, when we forget to acknowledge your presence in the image of our brothers and sisters, and for moments we fail to be good stewards of the blessings you have given us. Continue to guide and protect each one of us, Lord, that we may always walk in the light of your everlasting love and mercy. Grant us, Father, with your comfort in times of distress and with your strength in times of weakness. Bestow upon us your unending grace and healing, that we in turn become instruments of gentleness and compassion to others. We ask all this in the name of your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, with the prayer and the intercession of our Blessed Mother. Amen.
Manama, mawantog ka. Warag po ko iling ko'y ko. O Diyos, kahibulungan ka. Busa ikaw lang ang simbahon ko. Busa ikaw lang ang alagaran ko.
All right. Once again, welcome everyone to our webinar, Emerging Gender Issues Amidst the COVID-19 Pandemic. To present the objectives of the activity, our division's Senior Education Program Specialist, Dr. Lyricil D. Sharot.
Good morning. My respect to our heads in that Edmati City, our SDS, Ma'am Aluna C. Uy, our ASDS, Dr. Maria Genevieve T. Francisquete, our chiefs, Sir Julie Uy, Ma'am Maria Gina Flores, and our God focal person, Mr. Illuminado Boyser. To our partners in DUSCST, Davao Oriental State College of Science and Technology, God Center, under the leadership of OIC President Dr. Edito Sumili, God Center Director Dr. Geraldine Sacro, God Focal Persons Professor Mary Phil Bauyot, and Mr. Jonel Villegas. This initiative came about after reflecting the need to look into the well-being of our teachers in Mati City during this pandemic. The new normal is very far from the usual scenario during this pandemic. During this time, right? The new normal really is a very different now in comparison to the last time that we had because of this COVID-19. New sociological issues arise as this phenomenon persists. This webinar intends to capacitate our teachers so they may have a better grasp, which is a requisite to a good planning and appropriate actions to be taken during this time. We hope that you will have new insights to share to everyone after this activity. Once again, good morning.
Thank you, Doc Clay, for presenting the objectives. At this juncture, we will hear a message from our Assistant Schools Division Superintendent, Dr. Maria Genevieve T. Francisquete. All right. So later we will be hearing the message from our Assistant Schools Division Superintendent, Dr. Maria Genevieve T. Francisquete. Moving right along, it is now my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker. She is a graduate from Ateneo de Davao University, Master in Applied Sociology and Anthropology in Ateneo de Manila University, a Master in Applied Social Research in Ateneo de Davao University, and a candidate for Doctor of Philosophy in Development Studies in Ateneo de Davao University. She is a faculty of Davao del Norte State College and the Gender and Development Focal Person of the Davao del Norte State College. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Professor Sadi D. Lauay. Before we before we will uh, ladies and gentlemen, at this juncture, we will now hear a message from our Assistant Schools Division Superintendent, Dr. Maria Genevieve T. Francisquete.
Good morning, Bam. Good morning, everyone. Let's just call this as part of the technology gap. My greetings to our Schools Division Superintendent, Ma'am Aluna Uy, to Dr. Leo Rizal Sharot, and all other SDO-based personnel. My greetings also to the president of the Davao Oriental State University, the OIC president, Mili, to our resource person for the day, Professor Sadi Lauay, dear school heads, teachers, and all others who are with us virtually, good morning. Now, this activity with our ever supportive partner, the Davao Oriental State University, entitled Emerging Gender Issues Amidst COVID-19 Pandemic, speaks that there are other situations that we need to look into, as explained also by Dr. Ciarat earlier, situations that we need to understand because these situations can possibly or even surely affect the delivery of our education services. Now, since the pandemic has started, there are restrictions of people's movements. We have this stay at home curfews, and we look at this as a good mechanism to ensure safety of our learners. However, there are situations where homes do not become a refuge or a safe place for everyone. During the pandemic and during the restrictions of movements, there are reported increase of domestic violence. There are also violence against women and children and more. Now, if we have online platforms for learning, there are also platforms of abuse online, which form part of what we call as online platform or online form of violence and even sexual abuse. And of course, there is that some of the victims are of school age and they are our learners. Now, there are also situations where our students or learners are from families that are adversely affected economically. There are also children who are from single parent households. There are children whose parents are frontliners. Now, those are just few of the many situations that are indirectly confronting our education system because its effect is very indirect to our end. Our resource person today will surely share more about of those issues and what can we do in the Department of Education? What can be our part with these emerging gender issues? It is expected that after gaining more knowledge about those issues, we can translate our knowledge, our those information into teaching methods and techniques to cater the unique situations and needs of our learners. It is not enough that we are we just know, but we in the basic education sector should do also our part to assist our learners. The pandemic has not ended yet. There are still threats and heightened risks. So, few things that we can possibly do as educators is first to learn about the issues. We cannot do something if we do not know what's happening. And second, we can make our learners and even their respective communities to be aware of the services in relation and in response to these issues, how they can have the access to these services. And I am sure that this is part of education. As teachers by profession and heart, we always love our learners. And this love to learners alone is already a strong mechanism to awaken our discernments and instincts to do something beyond what books, what modules, and what e-classrooms can offer. So once again, good morning to each and everyone and happy learning.
Thank you for the message, Doc Jen. All right, it is now my pleasure again to introduce our guest speaker. She is a graduate from Ateneo de Davao University, a master in applied sociology and anthropology in Ateneo de Manila University, a master in applied social research in Ateneo de Davao University, a candidate for Doctor of Philosophy in Development Studies in Ateneo de Davao University, and she is a faculty of Davao del Norte State College and the Gender and Development Focal Person of DNSC. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Professor Sadi D. Lauay.
Hello, good morning everyone. Maayong buntag. Thank you for that kind introduction. It's my honor to be with you all this morning. First of all, I would like to thank the DOSST Gender and Development Center headed by Dr. Geraldine Sacro with her equally active and member Miss Maryfield Bauyot and Mr. Janelle Villegas for inviting me to be part of this endeavor. Thank you also for Dep and Mati for this kind of collaboration. I know you are very busy with your simulations and preparation for the coming opening of the school year. And thank you for each and everyone for spending your time to be with us this morning. So I hope you will learn something from our discussion and maybe come up with some policies addressing gender issues in the schools. Okay, so let me share my screen. Okay ra ba ta? Okay. Nasaan siya? Wait lang for nasaan siya ga? Your entire then okay. So I am tasked to talk about the second topic for this God webinar series entitled Emerging Gender Issues Amidst COVID-19 Pandemic. So you will have another two more topics for the next month and the next coming months under with Dr. Jerin Sacro and Miss Merrifield Bauyot. So to start with, um, why do we need to discuss sex and gender? So when we take a gender lens to understanding why some people are more at risk than others, it will be essential to building a resilience in the health system. So it is essential to address and integrate not only women and girls issues, but all genders in the immediate and long-term needs into COVID-19 response and recovery efforts in the country. So when we are planning to construct a global health system or even in our local health system, it should be fit for the purpose in the 21st century and truly delivering on commitments to health and well-being for all. No, that was also shared earlier by Dr. Francis Kete that one of the affected sectors in terms of gender issues are our learners. So let's have some review on concepts on gender. Okay. So we have statuses. So gender statuses are not just about men and women, but about all other genders in complicated interactions with age, class, and other variables. So these age, class, and religion or other variables, this is called our intersectionalities. And these intersectionalities contributes to its complexity. For example, um, poorer, poorer male, or older, poorer female, or it could be older, richer female, or older or younger, richer female. So these sectionality should be considered in looking at gender statuses. Next is the gender expectations, norms, and behavior. So society defines the rules, how you walk, how you talk, and how you dress, or even how you laugh, or even how you look at your fingers. Ba? So ultimately, society defines ourselves and who we can be. So it is dictated by the environment or the society. Okay. Next, we have another concept that is very new to us, the COVID-19. So bagong-bago, 19, because during it was late 2019, the emergence of COVID was late 2019, and it was declared pandemic in February 2020. And this pandemic have a great impact in our lives. So the world will never be the same again with our lives affected in every aspect. So especially in the Philippines, as they say, we have the world's longest lockdown, and we are having lockdowns now, no? But per LGU na siya. But still there are lockdowns that is happening in our society. So what we are dreaming, we wanted to have back our normal lives, our normal way of living, just like before nung wala pa si COVID. Or are we ready to a new normal? This is now a new normal, or is this a better normal? That's a point of reflection for all of us. Okay. So if we all converge that gender statuses, norms, behavior, and COVID, we come up with the emerging gender issues. So there are issues that emerged during the COVID pandemic. And that is our objective for the day or for this time. We're going to understand what are gender issues that emerged during the COVID pandemic. Okay. So let's start with the pandemic sex. I am sure Mr. Villegas explained the difference between sex and gender in your previous webinar. So let's look at the pandemic sex. So this is on the biomedical explanation. They said that women's immune system are stronger than men. So the hormones of women's progesterone has anti-inflammatory effect. And so that's why they have stronger immune system. While men have more underlying medical conditions that increase risk for complications and death, just like heart disease, respiratory ailments, and hypertensions. So if you are going to look at the DOH data, so you look at the cases, recoveries, and deaths by demographic, by sex, the male or the pink color, the female are pink color, the male are the blue color. So if you look at the cases, there are more male aged 25 to 29 who have COVID-19 disease, no? So more male. If you look at the death data, a lot of male also have high risk for death for COVID-19. For the ages of 65 to 95 years old, 9.5% resulted to death for males. So medyo daghan mamatay sa mga lalaki, no? So sa may biomedical explanation, well, female have more stronger immune system. But of course, there are also deaths from female. Okay? So you look at this is the data as of August 6, 2020. Okay? Although this is not conclusive, but at least we have data to look into the demographic cases of COVID. Okay? So, COVID is not, well, COVID started as a medical issue. Okay? But because of the effect of COVID in the different aspects of our lives, it's not only a medical issue, it's not only a health issue, it's more than biology. So even the underlying medical conditions of COVID may have a social aspects. So men's behavior partially accounts for the underlying medical conditions. So who smokes more? It's men, ba? Smoking, alcohol consumption, and even not washing hands as often as women. So when we go out and we observe that a lot of men go out more than women, so and by that they are more prone to not using masks. And even with masks, they don't use them correctly, no? So we observe that. I'm sure you observe that in our environment. So men also talk strong and loud in the society because they are men. They have to be strong. They have to. That's why they talk loud. So if we think that COVID is a virus that is airborne, then that contributes to the risk. No? Though a lot of our frontliners are women and LGBTs, and these women and LGBTs, they risk infection and death from COVID. But again, if you look at into the cases, if you look at the data of the DOH, death rate still seems higher with men. So that's the biomedical part of COVID. Now let's go to the sociological aspect. Okay, what issues brought about by COVID in gender? So one major issue of COVID is the domestic violence. So if you look at the data from March 16 to June, there are 2,131 cases of reported domestic violence case. And by June 17, a 115 case that was added. So there is a total nationwide of 2,246 cases. The true figures are probably higher. Now, these are only reported cases. So how about those who are not reported? So it is more higher now since lockdown and quarantine measures have trapped women and girls, of course, with abusive partners and family members. So women's shelters are closed because of the quarantine and the lockdowns. Services for these women are also scaled back because of the lockdowns and the quarantine. That's why, although when we compare the statistics last year, this is lower, but still there are cases of domestic violence. So this data is came from the PNP. Okay. And more on domestic violence, there were 5,049 investigations conducted by the PNP, Women's and Children Protection Desk nationwide. This is a nationwide data, and there were 3,628 arrests, and they were 3,462 inquest proceedings of the domestic violence. So this data is from March 16 to June 15. So we don't have a latest data of on August. But if you look at the numbers, this is high, relatively high. So according to the Commissions on Human Rights, the heightened occurrence of abuse is a pattern in many repeated emergencies. So there are abuses that happens during the emergencies. No, what kind of emergencies? This might be driven by conflict. This might be because of the disaster, or because of the pandemic, no, or the disease outbreak. Okay. Along with domestic violence, we have rape, another issue that of course is already present even before without COVID. But if you look at the data, we have 602 people reported being raped. No, and if you look at the average, there were 8 people daily that is being raped. This data is from March 17 to May 23, 2020. So again, women and girls are being locked down, and they are with the abusive members, or their intimate partners, or in the abusive family members. So that contributes to the number of rape cases in the Philippines. Okay. Other violence against women issue. So we have sexual harassments at COVID-19 checkpoints. I don't know if you heard some news about this. Harassments done by the police and the military officers. If you notice, women only make up 12% in the law enforcement in the Philippines. And with this 12%, the mandatory checks and physical screenings of women, such as temperature checks, are often done or conducted by male officers. And that is an avenue for an harassment. There is also sexual bartering of essential goods. And this emerges during the pandemic, because barter is very popular nowadays. So, ang barter, hindi lang pala si Monstera deliciosa, si snake plant, or si potus ang binabarter, but also sex is being bartered. There is a news recently that a child post her nude pictures online so that she can barter with gadgets, because of course schools are going to start now. So the it was reported in the news, no. So sexual bartering is present during this time. We also have sexual advances for quarantine passes. So police officers and military men have these advances to women in order for them to pass in the checkpoints. Harassment also of health workers. So what are harassments? Such as during the first month of the lockdown, there were refusal of basic services for the health workers or the frontliners, such as transportation. No, this happened in Metro Manila. So they have difficulty for transportation because of the lockdown. And major violence against women issue during this pandemic is what we call online sexual exploitation. There's really an increase on online sexual exploitation. So women and children are being coerced into online pornography and being sexually exploited and abused online. So we have data on this na because of the pandemic, we have this kind of issues. Okay. More on the gender issues, our old biases worsen with the COVID-19. What are these biases against LGBT? So we have, these are some of the examples that happens during the pandemic, during the lockdown. There is one transgender who collapsed and died in Tomas Morato, and no one helps the person. no? Because they're afraid that that person have a COVID disease. So they let the person died on the street. Okay. I think you can search that in the YouTube. One person put an umbrella to the lying person. In lang. But other than that, they don't they did not offer any help. Another, transgenders and gay men made to kiss each other publicly by a barangay official in Pampanga as a form of punishment for quarantine violation. I'm sure you see that in the news. No, they made gay men kiss each other because of as a form of punishment. Even in Davao, one barangay official they let the violators swim in the canal as a form of punishment. So we have this prejudice on LGBTs. No, we use humiliation as a form of punishment, and this worsen when we have the COVID-19. Okay, so gender prejudice and discrimination. This is a story of I think this is a UP gay professor whose partner for 15 years died of cancer in April. And he was caring for that partner, but was constantly being asked to leave his partner because it's only the legal spouse or the parents can be with the patient in the critical care. So eventually, his partner died, and he continued to face other battles such as accessing finances. Okay, you can also look at that in the Philippine Daily Inquirer, April 15, entitled "Grieving in Our Time." So there is an increase of discrimination, especially to our LGBT members. Okay, so during the COVID-19, gender injustice amplified. So there is a replay from the past that reminds us that social injustices are amplified in times of disaster. Like in example in the ayuda, or in quarantine, did anyone think of providing sanitary napkins for women, for girls? Wala. Wala din kami natanggap for ayuda. Or what about reproductive health services like family planning? Is this available during the pandemic, during the lockdown? Okay, it was scaled back. So are we going to see a baby boom comes 2021? Oh, babies are being named as COVID. Diba? So we expect an increase in population comes 2021 because reproductive health services are not available during the pandemic and during the lockdown and the quarantine period. Okay? So that amplifies injustice, gender injustice. Okay? They did not look into the needs of women and girls during this time. How about education? So I think this is our concern. So more boys than girls drop out from elementary and high school. And we expect that this will worsen with the crisis. There is a study of the UNICEF last 2016 and looking into the prevalence of violence on boys. No? So in the study, males, in terms of violence, prevalence of violence, males at 81.5% higher than females, which only have 78.4%. So the level of severe violence on males is higher compared to females. And this severe violence that requires hospitalization. Okay? In terms of the psychological abuse, there was no significant difference between males and females. So the males, almost the same. In males, we have 7.9%. Females, all have 8.0%. So both are psychologically abused. No? But if we look into the sexual violence, more males experience sexual violence compared to females. For males, we have 24.7%, and for females, we only have 18.2%. And there were more males that is sexually abused in schools. Males, we have 6.7%. and females we only have 4.5%. And in the community generally, males have 12.8% higher that were sexually abused in the community than females who only have 6.4%. So that's a point of reflection on the education part. How are we going to respond to this kind of issues? These are our learners. No? Do we have policies, gender policies in our school that will respond to our learners who experience abuses not only during the pandemic but generally abuses. Now, do we have that kind of policy? Do we reach out to our learners? Okay, so that's the data that we have right now. Now, there are factors that hinders our response to the violence against women during the pandemic time. One factor is the barangay delaying the release of the BPO. Okay, so the protection for women. Why? Because I think barangay are busy with the ayuda, with the SAP, no? So they scaled back the issue on women. The PNP Women's Desk deferring action post ECQ even in cases of rape, no? Because they are more busy on the COVID issues. There is also an inability to file complaints with the prosecutor's office because no officer to receive the complaints. A lot of us is working from home. No? Only a few times to go to the office. No? So there is an inability to file complaints. There is also a difficulty of survivors in obtaining medical legal examination. And it's very scary to go to the hospital right now because of the presence of COVID. So it would be very difficult for the victims to obtain medical legal examinations. And because of the lockdown and the quarantine, there is an absence of transportation. The mobility of persons or people are being constrained. So that's why in the data, for sure there will be there is a higher number of cases not reported to the police because of this kind of constraints. And lockdown of shelters are also a hindrance for the response on the violence against women. No, women centers are closed because of the quarantine and the pandemic. Okay? So these are factors that hinders in addressing violence against women in our during the time of COVID. So what will be our recommendation? So these recommendations are also some of these recommendations are recommended also by the UN Women. Okay. So number one, reporting and monitoring mechanism for violence against women and children that take into consideration COVID-19 mobility and community restrictions, as well as information communication technology, access and literacy should be enhanced. That's why we have this kind of activity. No? We need to learn not more on this kind of issue and learn or coming up with policy to address this kind of issue. Number two, women's shelters continue to be considered essential services and remain accessible to women and children during COVID-19. Dapat open pa din. Or it should be accessible to all, no? Especially for rape victims or domestic violence victims. Okay. Number three, delivery of sexual and reproductive health services, including contraception and maternal health services, should be maintained during COVID-19. Diba? Ayaw naman natin magkaroon ng baby boom sa 2021. So, health services, accessibility of contraception should be maintained, even if there is lockdown or even if there is quarantine. Number four, implementation of laws on gender-based violence and gender equality should continue. No? Uh, Although we have new laws now like the yun, uh, for the terrorism, the law on terrorism, okay? But we should we should also focus on laws on gender, especially that there are gender issues that emerge during this time. Social protections must recognize and respond to the needs of diverse women. No? That includes indigenous women, women with disabilities, those women that in uh, the Bakwit women, women migrant workers, and the LGBTQI women. So these are some of the recommendations when we talk about gender issues. Okay. So the UN Women address COVID-19. They said that to address COVID-19, it is a must to address an economic impact on women. But if you notice, women look for ways, no, for to augment economic problem. Ba? We go online selling, no, cooking or selling food online just to augment our economic problem. The gender responsive approach must also protect essential health services for women and girls. And it is a must to prioritize services to respond to domestic violence. Okay? So these are some of the recommendations given by the United Nations to address gender issues during the pandemic. Okay? And lastly, no, uh, we call for a gender inclusive COVID-19 action. Okay? If we look at our IAFT, diba, they are the one making the policy for COVID. Who are the members of the IAFT? It is headed by a military man. I have not heard from any of the women members in the task force. So there is no women perspective in the IAFT. So we call for a gender inclusive COVID-19 action. Okay. So when we talk of gender inclusive, we are not only talking for women and girls, but we are talking of all genders. That it should be a center when we come up with policies, when we respond to the problem of COVID. Okay. And that is the last part. Okay. So this is also my reference. So we are now open forum if there are some questions.
Yeah, so thank you, Professor Sagi. No? So, everyone, if you have questions po, so you can write down your questions sa comment section po sa FB page natin kasi we are linked po sa FB page natin. So, we can read na lang mga questions for Professor Sagi. So, thank you so much, Doc Sagi, no? Very relevant and timely yung topic natin today because nga madaghay na kuan ang mga issues ba marag masing tabi. Ayan, because we are too kuan kay katutok tayo sa COVID-19. So, ayan. So, any questions, moms and sirs? Ayan.
I think the next webinar will look into deeper on the violence against women, no? And that would be given by Dr. Saki on the legal perspective. Okay.
Oh, yes, yes. So, we will be having again the third
The
part
third,
of our
yes.
yes, the third part. Okay. So questions, mom and sirs. Ayan po. So open pa po na sasagot si Professor Sadi sa mga questions natin regarding the emerging issues, no? Emerging gender issues amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. Ayan. So, going once, going twice, wala jud. Ayan. So, medyo na, kuan jud no, na sabtan. Okay. Ayan. So, mga school heads, teachers. Alright, so murag wala dyan
So
ko mga
the challenge for us now is the education. The challenge for us is how to respond to this kind of problem. No, that we are on the online platform and we don't see our learners. Diba? Physically, we don't see our learners. So what will be our
yes.
response sa education, sa school side? Okay. So if I don't know if you do home visit. You still do home visit right now?
Yes po, sa ubang mga kuan na mo,
Mm.
doc. Pero syempre, yun nga, cautious gihapon ta.
Yes.
Yan. So, kasi luoy po na mga teachers man po good no.
Yes.
Yan. So, kailangan po na to jud po makuha nilang safety.
Protektahan, yes.
Yes.
And this
Kaayo.
issue is not only limited to our learners, ha? We also have,
Yes.
yes, it's also, of course, it's a problem of all, no?
Tama jud ka doc tama jud ka prof no kasi na may times man din kasi mingon na siya teacher bitaw ka kuan kaya ra na nimo pero syempre tao ra pud no na pud tay mga rights as an adult dili lang kay ang atong mga estudyante so ayan ato gihapong protektahan atong mga teachers and atong even not only the teaching but also the non-teaching personnel. Yes. Kasi tayo sa lalo na sa division, no? Tayo man ang jud ang ilaha pong ginakuhaan og sources or information. So, ayan.
We are also frontliners, by the way.
Yeah. Di, kasi naamong battle between the frontliners sa health sector and sa education sector, no? So,
Yes.
tanan ta frontliners kay naghatag man ta og services.
Service, yes.
Yes. Kasi naghatag tayo services sa mga tao, no? Lalo na ngayon, ang mga teachers, no? I-consider talaga natin sila din ang priority dapat din ngayong mga times, no? Kay mga estudyante po na to ang ato ang mga recipients. So, ayan. So, no more questions, ladies and gentlemen. Ayan po. So, yes, Professor, no, thank you so much for imparting your knowledge. We've learned so much from you this day. Again, thank you for sharing. Talagang medyo na nag-guide jud minimo, no? Kay magdagan jud kay question bitaw, no? Murag COVID-19 kaayo ta pero naa pa jud tay other issues then. Di ba? No? So, Doc Leo Sharot, for our closing remarks.
Okay. Magandang umaga po uli sa lahat. Babasahin ko po muna yung sertipiko ng pagkilala para po sa ating panauhing tagapagsalita. Okay po? Ito po yun. Ayan. Republic of the Philippines, Department of Education, Region 11, Schools Division of the City of Mati, Dahican City of Mati, Certificate of Appreciation. This certificate is awarded to Professor Sadi D. Laway in recognition of her meritorious role as speaker during the conduct of the webinar on emerging gender issues amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, given at the ICT Library Hub, Dahican, City of Mati on August 11, 2020, signed Aluna C. Uy, CESO 6, Assistant Schools Division Superintendent, Officer in Charge, Office of the Schools Division Superintendent. Muli po, paalala po sa lahat ng mga sumali sa araw na ito, yung attendance at evaluation po ay nagpa-flash po sa baba, no? So, huwag niyo pong kalimutan. Taos po ang aming pasasalamat sa lahat ng sumali sa webinar na ito at sa ating pong speaker, si Ma'am Sadi. Marami pong salamat. Naway marami po tayong napulot na makabuluhang impormasyon. Sadya po talaga ng Kagawaran ng Edukasyon sangay ng lungsod ng Mati kasama ang Davao Oriental State College of Science and Technology, God Center, na maipaabot sa bawat guro ang kahalagahan ng pangkalahatang pagbabago ng bawat isa upang mas mapabuti at mapag-ibayo ang pagtupad ng mga gampanin. At sa gayon ay maabot natin ang minimithing kaunlaran. Hinihimok po natin ang bawat isa na maging alagad at tulay ng paggalang sa pagkakaiba-iba, maging responsabling mamamayan, at maging liwanag at gamot sa sugatang lipunan sa panahon ng pandemya. Maraming salamat po kay Ma'am Marnie, Ma'am Bambi, kay Sir Joey na tumulong sa atin. Muli po, bumabati po ako ng pasasalamat at again po, napakagandang umaga po sa lahat. Mabuhay po tayong lahat.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was a wrap up from this morning. No, on behalf of the schools division of the schools division of the city of Mati, headed by our schools division superintendent, Mrs. Alona C. Uy. Thank you po for making time in your busy schedules to join us this morning. And we will be expecting you again sa ating third batch sa GAD webinar series natin. We will be posting po via updates and the schedules. So it has been my pleasure to host this webinar. Wish you all a pleasant day. Keep safe, everyone. Good morning.